Kahn. See, Jeffrey, was it you who just gave me an out that the paintings speak for themselves? Thank you. Now I'll sit down. So I had a show a couple of years ago at the hospital, and I had this big speech, and I read from the speech, and I was all nervous, and it was a good speech, and it told about my artistic journey. But I just thought, I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to say. Most of you know me, and I'm just delighted to see all of the faces of everybody I know. It's just a real pleasure and a real treat and a real highlight for me. So thank you all for coming and for being appreciators of my art. What do people want to know? I didn't start painting until in my late 40s because I thought you had to have a gene, and nobody in our family had that gene. Anything we did with our hands. And a way that my sister and I got sweaters, see, this is totally off the cuff. We got sweaters in high school for our wardrobe because our dad said, I'll pay for the yarn if you knit them. Now, he could afford to buy us sweaters. My mother didn't, that was another story. But our father, so we knitted sweaters. And we had nice sweaters for high school. But as far as art, I took art history when I was my first year of college, and I just loved looking at art, and I was in awe of anybody who could do art. So my neighbor, the Cantors, when I lived in Calais, Melinda and Jeff lived across the street, and we were good friends. And Melinda was an artist, and our kids were taking classes with Joyce Pontac in Montpelier. And Melinda said, well, why should they be having all the fun? We should go. She's giving a class. So we went, and that was the beginning of my art journey with Joyce. She was, and what does it take to be a good teacher? Being positive and encouraging of your students. I think that's the first thing. And she would say, now, they were kind of ridiculous things. She, I don't know, I'm not quoting. She'd say, the space between your paintings reminds me of Van Gogh. Look him up, or something. So I would look up these artists, and the space, of course, it looks the same between anybody's paintings. But she was encouraging, and that's what kept me going, and it's kept me going till today, through thick and thin, through deaths in the family, through divorce, through sickness. It's been a journey, and I'm a bit of a junkie for pastels and colors, and it's cheaper than drugs, I think. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, I keep acquiring more and more, and it's my go-to. And at first I did plein air a lot because I love being outdoors in the summer. And you can't just go and sit all day. I mean, you can, but it gave me something else to do while I was outside. And new places to go to. And I had a buddy, Jan Garigelli, in Montpelier. And we used to go and we'd roam the roads, and then we put a lot of miles on the cars trying to find the right spot, the perfect spot. And there's no perfect spot, but finally we'd say, we've driven enough, we just have to stop and paint. So we would do that. And then with the pandemic, I got into doing more portraits. I had done a little bit before and was always kind of psyched to do them, but with Zoom, that gave me the opportunity of not having to lug all of my equipment up and down stairs at night, which I had done somewhat when I was younger in Montpelier. So it worked better for me, and I'm still doing them, and I've met a lot of people on Zoom who I consider friends, even though I've never met them. And I'm going to meet one of them because she turns out she was the best friend of Barbara Bendix in Marshfield, and she lives in Hawaii, and she's coming to visit, and we're going to meet for the first time. So there are a lot of stories that go with it, and anyway, I love doing it, and I thank you all for coming. This was not a prepared speech.
Joyce, there's a story with every one of your paintings that is as long as the story you just told.
Oh, God.
And it would be wonderful
Excuse me.
if those stories could be attached to those paintings. But
I have to ask one thing. If anyone saw a set of keys, someone's trying to leave and their keys are missing.
Oh, wow.
Anyone saw a set of keys, just let us know. I'll be in the back. Sorry, Pedro.
Yeah, Stephen packed me up when I moved. I had lived in one place in Montpelier for, 11 years, and I used to go religiously to Janine Lund. Janine Lund was a teacher in town, and she had a class every Monday night. And I think I went for 10 years, and then she took groups to Basin Harbor in the summer, and we painted there for a week. And anyway, I had this big, and those of you who know me know I have trouble throwing things out. So I had a lot of paintings, and you tied them up. You packed them, and I remember you said to me something like, "Now I understand," because he saw where I had started, or he saw some of the beginning paintings and how over time they had changed and they kept going, and that was 11 or 12 years ago. So it's anyway.
it was wonderful.
Thank you.
That
Thank you.
progress that you're making.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, and now, thank you, Joyce. It was just lovely to hear about your development.
The keys have been found.
Oh, yay! Okay. So now it's our time. I'd like to introduce one of our poets, one of our two poets, Dahi. And what is to know about Dahi is that he lives with his wife in Montpelier on the unceded land of the Abenaki, something that he wants us to really be aware of, and that he has published poems in Tendril, Refocus, and the recent anthologies of Poem City. And one of the very exciting things when we think about land and ancestry, he claims his ancestral land is really what is now called Ireland. So I'd like to invite Dahi. Whoops, and now you can take care of this thing. Someone else can babysit that thing.
He's not loving that little mic.
Big feet. Testing. Can you hear me out back there? A little louder.
It has to be next to you, guys. Now, keep
Okay.
doing it.
The problem is I don't want to blast people, and I might if I get going too fast.
Blast away.
I want to talk about Joyce for a moment. Joyce approached me in the community garden, North Branch Community Garden, and she said, "Do you know any poets?" And we go back ways as neighbors in and around North Montpelier. But I have to tell you, if by invitation she asks you, "You want to come see my flowers in the North Branch?" Oh, you would be in for a treat, because they are extraordinary, and her painting reminds me of that as well. So I tried to come up with some poems that might fit, and one that fit, I thought, quite well. goes back to my wife's grandmother's tendency to press pansies for stationaries. And if any of you haven't seen a letterpress for flowers, they are just absolutely marvelous. Does anything need water?
It's fine.
Okay. So this one is called This Flower Letter That I Pressed for You. And it was written on Mother's Day, and I sent it or presented it to my wife. But everyone else in there, it goes back to her grandmother. This flower letter that I pressed for you. This flower letter that I pressed for you goes back to Nan and Nan. When I first saw the flower press, it looked like a Gutenberg press. Upon closer inspection, it was a bundle of porous papers sandwiched between two wooden blocks like a cider press. When the block came off, the layers revealed an album of wildflowers. Instead of Aunt Jennifer's or Uncle Richard's faces, there was a rich array of meadow flowers, and each one had a history, and each one had a place, and each one had its mottled mix of colors and a face of its own. Of course, like you, your grandmother and your mother knew the Latin names, Rosa rugosa, commonly known as beach plum. So now, when I look at photo albums of your Nan and you and our daughter, I think, aren't we all just wildflowers in a field of our own, with a history, a place, our true complexions, and a face? All right. Next one is a little different. It got published by the Troubadour. I would talk about Poetry Society of Vermont, but Elizabeth will go at it better than I. She's well versed in every way. And the Poetry Society of Vermont, there's some pamphlets here. Look them up. They've been around since 1947. They're sort of like, well, if you heard of the Buena Vista Social Club in Cuba, this is sort of like the Poetry Club in Vermont. All you got to be is a Vermonter that is interested in poetry and wants to do their best, and we have just a wide variety of poets and expressions. So it's great fun. So this one was published recently. It's called Joseph and Roy. A black and white photograph upon windswept Lake Eden. A daguerreotype where their figures are outlined in the black against the snow, blinding whiteness and glassy etched ice. Hunched over, leaning toward the ever-gaping augured hole, they sit upon their cooler, a perfect pair. Notice how Joseph, freckled face and wide-eyed, takes in Roy's instructions as his northwards guide. How to hold the jig, how to bob the line, how to attach minnows or disattach perch eyes for bait with a flick of a thumb. Then, when to twitch the jig, how to tend to the tip-up. When its flag flips high, surrendering its nylon wing to the hungry eyes of the fisherman, like a raven plummeting and tumbling against a piercing wind. But most of all, what it means to huddle and confer against the wintry slopes of time. for anybody who's ever had a community, been a part of a community garden, it's sometimes a joy and sometimes a challenge. And it's sometimes sort of like democracy. You never know how things are going to be interpreted or how people are going to behave, even though they allegedly share the same area as you do. But you never know. So this is based on when things might go south. And apologies to James Whitcomb Riley and his poem, The Goblin Will Get You If You Don't Watch Out. The bad karma woodchuck. There are workers in the garden who pull weeds, who mulch and seed, but there are slackers out amongst us who only want our feed. In our garden shared and burlapped, they sit back and just grow weeds. When fellow farmers sound the blight alarm to pull up plants and take them home, they leave their plants in the ground to plague the plots next door, or toss them in a compost pile for next year's crops to store. To all you Jamestown laggards who sit on your fat backsides during planting, tending, gleaning, be forewarned, advised, and heart-struck. The bad karma woodchuck will get you if you don't buck up. Now we're moving into a different zone and time, but it's agricultural in part. This is called Corn on the Cob, and it's to all of Vermont migrant workers. God, I love corn on the cob, rolling each barrel of kernels deep into a butter dish. My eyes are going more than anything. I'm going to start over. God, I love corn on the cob, rolling each barrel of kernels deep into a butter dish, bathing it in salt and pepper, then hoovering the whole cob, twirling it all the while, like some radiant hog who has unearthed a bed of truffles. What an ungrateful slob, never giving a thought how the farmer with migrant workers who flew like Canada geese to Vermont from Jamaica, till the soil, plant the seed, water and nourish the corn. Then the magic begins. Tassels, airdrop pollen, and hot wire the ear silk for each and every formed kernel. The migrant workers bring each ear swaddled in green and toss dozens into a wooden bin. Just think, each silken strand with each ear becomes a torch from the sun. Now, this is agricultural, but it unfortunately is of a sort that we'd rather stay in denial more often than acknowledge sometimes what's going around us. And I think over the course of maybe 3 months or so, a lot of what's in here were actually events that were documented, and not just in Vermont, but elsewhere. And it's called Diminished. We are all so much less now. Climate refugees from the Cree Nation of old Nemaska up in smoke. Iraqi farmers from Basra, a former breadbasket, gone dry. Even Vermonters have been flooded, mucked by muddied waters, torn asunder, gutted houses, ruined crops. Soon, We will ally with polar bears, beached pilot whales, and sky-filled, wing-flapped shadows of carrier pigeons. On a brighter note, I try to balance these things. It's interesting, Joyce was talking about what I call the plague years, but when COVID was really here thick and thin, it's not left us yet, but most of us have developed some level of immunity. But before we were let out of our houses and out of our closets and out of our little rooms, it was feeling rather bleak, I think. Needing and knowing that we had to take certain precautions for other people's health, it was worth it. But then I thought, oh, maybe this is the light is coming through the darkness. Maybe something's going to happen here, and maybe we can celebrate. So this was something that was published in Poem City, but I treasure this celebration. It's called When We Come Up for Air. When we come up for air, let us be holding each other, knowing to be tender, carrying our memories within us that span oceans, countrysides, and cities under gnarly grandmother trees, protecting and cradling us. When we come up for air, let all our children be healthy, fed, loved, and protected by community, city, and the world, where all our children will be likened to sequoia seeds to shade future forests. When we come up for air, let our friends still be there, supporting us as wizened sages, hardened synapses, and true mirrors of our souls and visage. When we come up for air, let fish nibble our toes, teach us to prefer simple things, plants, animals, and rain when we come up for air. This one is sort of dark, but not as dark. But it's, as I realized that what we're dealing with quite often is surreal, is both interior and exterior. So this sort of covers both in a fashion. It's called Incident Report. Whenever my inner orphan takes control, I get lost. First, he hides all family albums, and I forget my last name. Next, he covers all mirrors, and I forget my face. When he takes down all the walls, I become a missing person. Then it gets worse. His hungry ghost throat becomes a black hole. He swallows the sun and the moon, entire galaxies. He has entered a deep state of non-being. Only 3 things will spare him: to be bound in a walnut shell, to reclaim his landline, and to rediscover his ball jar filled with fading summer ember of fireflies from his youthful field. One of my favorites, this is published in Randolph, and I think normally, I don't want to say I'm snooty, but if I send a poem and I've worked on a poem, I expect the reader to do some work. I'm not going to do this here because I'm reading, and you don't even have a copy. And so I have to give you a heads up on a few things. And basically, if you're not well versed in Irish lore and folklore, and you might be, there's a character named Finn, and I'm not going to tell the whole story. It's a fascinating story, but basically he ends up from eating a talking fish, a salmon. He ends up being able to talk to all sorts of animals and fish. He gets this power that the fish once had, and it becomes his. So that's Finn McCool. And the other person that's mentioned here is, well, as far as we know, is a person is Enkidu. And Enkidu is out of a Sumerian epic. And one of the things that's fascinating about him, before he became quote unquote civilized, is that he could talk to all the beasts that were around him. Oops, I'm not used to mics. And so Enkidu could speak beast, as it were. So those are two references that you need to know if you weren't familiar with them. And I think it gives another level of understanding. And if we talk about maybe being able to converse in a language of one sort or another with animals, we're also beginning to see that that's possible with trees and grass and so forth. And the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll read it, and I want to thank Joyce and the Jaquith Library for their hospitality. Great stuff up there on the walls, Joyce. Umwelt is a name that means when an animal is moving through the world, it will make sense of what's around by the perceptions that it carries. And if you haven't read An Immense World by Ed Yong, and you like reading about how animals perceive the world, it's a fascinating thing. So Umwelt is really the world of your perceptual world, how we as individuals, whether we're humans or we're hummingbirds or whatever creature we are, is how you see the world and what perceptual apparatus you have. Now that's a long explanation, but I think it's important. The title is Umwelt, and that's what it means. She lives beyond the village of words, near where water and wind blend their voices in chorus. She has taken up intensive listening for 5 solitary years. First, she studied bird. 60 months in, she warbled one most shapely note. Now folks say she is as good as Finn McCool in fish and has already surpassed Enkidu in beast. Next year, she plans on learning grass from scratch. After that, then, perhaps tree with its vast network of underground roots deeper than Sanskrit. Thank you all.
Oh, to know the languages of the world. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And now, it's my great pleasure. I'm going to put this down because we're both shorter. We're both shorter here. It's my great pleasure to introduce Elizabeth McCarthy. And Elizabeth, besides being an extremely generous and lovely person, because she recognized that I was freezing when we came in, so I hope you haven't been too cold.
No.
She's loaned me this beautiful green sweater, so bless your heart for that. Elizabeth lives in Walden in an old farmhouse with a cat and a husband.
In that order.
And she was a teacher and has turned to poetry in 2020. And this is as a wonderful time of the poetry coming forward. Her first manuscript, Digging Potatoes, was shortlisted in the Hunger Mountain Vermont Council of the Fine Arts May Day Mountain Chapbook Series contest in 2021, followed by the publication of her chapbooks, Winter Bowl, Hard Feelings, and Wild Silence. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Elizabeth McCarthy.
I think it will work. Is that loud? Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, Joyce and David, for inviting me here. It was a pleasure to meet you and see your amazing artwork. As David mentioned, I'm going to put a plug in for the Poetry Society of Vermont. David and I are both on the executive board, and I manage the website. And so if you go to poetrysocietyofvermont.org, you can subscribe and get our newsletter. And you'll see every Monday morning, you'll get a newsletter. And this Monday coming out is an article David has written. He regularly writes our reviews of poetry and poetry reviews. So be sure to sign up and you'll get the Monday morning newsletter, and maybe it will inspire you to join as well. And if you join, you get one of our annual journals of poetry by our membership. I think that's all I had to remember. So I'm going to start with a poem from my recent book, Wild Silence. Standing in the woods on a gray sky morning, muffled in snow, is not the quiet void of cold silence that some imagine. Or hear in books, where static words mouth the dark and deep sound of solitude. Even the crow shaking frost's dust of snow cannot be heard within his heartbeat of his penciled line. But stay and listen for the raven's wing and the moaning rasp of touching trees, and hear the sound of winter's wild silence. Continuing on that outdoor theme, Tree of Solitude. This was written after a line in Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. The line was, "In the midst of the crowd, keep with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude." The Tree of Solitude. 'Tis an awakening to see oneself among the many trees in the forest, standing in the shadows of greatness on a midsummer morning, when sunlight streaks past with its sharp-edged rays, like a blade of shining glory, cutting through the falsity of the forest for the trees. Again, a poem inspired by a famous person, Walt Whitman. It was from a line in Leaves of Grass. The line was, "I lean and loaf at ease, observing a spear of summer grass." Waltman's vision of America. He loafed while war raged. People died and cities burned. He leaned and loafed, knowing the soul of a nation lived in the heart of America, threatened by fear and hatred. This grand experiment, democracy, dependent on blades of grass, that we now mow down with abandon. This poem is called Atlas. Condemned by war, he held up the sky, carrying things to the end of eternity in a shopping cart, filled with the world's belongings. Its squeaky wheels rolled onward along train tracks and highways. He moved from place to place, seeking home for the unwanted, mumbling on street corners, whispering warnings never heard until the weight he carried fell and crushed the earth, and with it, the myth of humanity. The next poem, it's based on a Greek mythology. It's called Lost Along the River Lethe. And Lethe, the river Lethe is one of the 5 rivers of the underworld, and Lethe means forgetfulness. It came to me one night, you'll see why. Lost along the river Lethe. The world left me mid-sentence. The word left me mid-sentence, leaving the context of our conversation hanging there on an empty branch along the riverbank, where a yellow-feathered songbird had just perched, singing clear-pitched notes of twills and twitters, then gone in an instant, flown off downstream, leaving me struggling to remember that word, once familiar, but now only faded letters floating in my mind as I searched and scoured the gray, empty sky, until it returned in the dead of night, where I lay in relief and annoyance at its late arrival and insignificant tune. Yeah. It happens to us all. This one is appropriate for the season. Carrying seeds. Weeds and wildflowers crackle on cold autumn days as their dried, brittle bones are snapped underfoot, reminding us to step lightly and look closely at the seeds with feathers and all the fallen beauty return to earth, while tenacious brown burrs cling tight to life as we carry on in rambles under the steel gray sky. And this came to me this September, an evening that you may have recognized the sound. A symphony of crickets perform all around us in the deep grass of an overgrown lawn and adjoining meadow, as we sit in weathered green Adirondack chairs that face the setting sun, our eyes closed, resting heads lean back. And once again, we hear the music of late summer, a courtship in nature, an unseen ritual, loud, consistent, and rhythmic chirping of male percussionists as they arc and scrape their ridged wings and play as if the world would end should they stop before darkness falls. And she hears the perfect song, making her silent move to choose a mate, his tone and tenor, everything that matters in this life together, as we stay and listen to the symphony before us and say nothing. That came after doing some research that it's only the male cricket you hear. The female waits and listens for the perfect tone. Yeah. Digging potatoes. Stepping on the edge of the shovel, my full weight sinks down into the dark, cold earth where new potatoes are buried, waiting to be lifted into the sunlight, washed and dried, filled sacks of golden orbs, treasures that only my ancestors knew, was life itself, the holy host that fed our people until the blight of man and nature left them to rot and die there in the green fields where Celtic gravestones now stand crooked, moss and lichen covered. Markers of my great lost long aunties and uncles, cousins who would sit at my table and laugh at the bounty before them as I served up my tiny white spuds. White Linen Mums, after Ted Kooser's poem, Flow Blue China. Faded stains of the past bleed across mother's linen tablecloth, though hardly visible among the white woven chrysanthemums that flourish in the fine Irish flax. Wine and gravy spilled long ago when chaos collided with good china and etched glass set for Thanksgiving, like high watermarks from major floods. They are reminders of our family's epic events in time. Today, stemware, platters, plates, and covered bowls are strategically placed over those shadowy marks, keeping memories alive amidst the delicate white mums. I still have the tablecloth. Grandmother's shoes. My grandmothers were badass. I didn't know that then when they walked in their thick black shoes. Tiny ladies who drank tea and prayed for us and every child in China who didn't have the food we were so lucky to have on our plates. Rosalind and Elizabeth live only in photographs, where their youth and beauty defy the image in my mind that only sees Mère and Ma. Women who at a moment in time changed their shoes to the hefty pair that held them down as they danced to life's weighty expectations. I have a picture of them there too. Yeah. A lot of my poems are memoir based. So. Wet wool mittens. I can still smell my red wool mittens and feel the soggy knit threads from winter long ago, when sisters and I carefully lifted heavy heads upon the rolled bodies of our giant snowmen, planting pieces of coal taken from the sooty cellar into their blank white faces, giving them a grand view of the garden where the carrots were pulled that fall, becoming noses to breathe the clear cold air, as they smiled with mouths made of upturned branches, broken from mother's resting lilac, that would bloom in spring after all the bodies returned to the earth. I added the next two poems after looking at some of the paintings here, the barns, and so it's called The Sheep Barn. The sheep barn, now empty but for spiders and swallows who weave and swoop through dusty beams of light, like gauzy dreams, familiar yet vague. Memories that smell of lanolin and hay, carrying sound of baths escaped the pen. No ordinary pigs, these sows were giants that lived on the other side of a slumping stone wall. We'd been warned to stay away, but there were new pink piglets to be seen. In an instant, stones rolled and all things changed. We scrambled and screamed, the big kids holding the little one's hand, eaten alive by a giant angry pigs, and the tight grip of family. It brings joy in knowing how perfect and lovely are both sows and siblings. A few more. Wooden fence. Our fence slumps and leans, its white paint peeled, faded gray with mold. Every 8 feet, a cedar post barely stands on its rotting foot, yet still it loosely embraces our patch of grass and trees and home, where toddlers once ran wild to escape the confines of love and to see what else might be beyond its invisible hold, that were stopped short by the wooden board fence that kept the nightmares out until it was time to open the gate and let them go. And I have one more poem. And this one, I'm sure as an older audience, you've been to recent funeral services, and my sisters and I and cousin, when we come back for them, we're like food critics. It's like we sort of review the procedure, and do we want that and that. And so I said, when I got back from the last one, I need to make plans. So here's my poem, My Afterlife Plans. Include an informal ceremony, outdoors on a partly cloudy day. Sentimental music playing in the background. The kind of music my kids did not want to hear. Patsy Cline, the Everly Brothers, the Platters, Sam Cooke, any of those gentle songs to send me off into the beyond, unhurried, in a thin cloud of ashen dust, where I'll transform into the raven you will one day see on your walks in the northern woods. And do not confuse me with those prattling crows who gather in anyone's field. I am not that social bird. My plan is to be me, gone to the wilds, on whooshing wings, singing a soft, mellow warble. So, thank you. Time for questions for David and Joyce and myself, if any of you have any questions for any of us.
I just had a quick question. When you publish your work, do you, because I like the imagery where you were talking about the food critic piece, about why you created that poem. When you publish the poems, do you put that piece in there just to give the background about where that came from? Because I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah, I don't though.
No?
Yeah, no, they're poems are poems.
I like the food critic piece.
I know. Yeah, actually that poem's not published. No, just.
Not yet.
No, I like the background behind it.
Yeah, a lot of times I don't. I don't know if the publishers care for that.
Oh.
My self-published book, I have one self-published book. I may have done that, but my other books are published, and the publisher, the editors generally just extraneous to them, I guess. I know. Yeah. So, well, thank you all very much. This has been a lovely event. Happy to attend.
There are some pamphlets from the Poetry Society of Vermont if you're interested, and there's for purchase at a very special price today is Elizabeth's book Wild Silence, so check it out.